So I clicked on debtnews.com and I opened up your column today, Nolan, and you're again, I think, tackling some of the questions about the future of Detroit and what the population is going to look like. And today you were talking mostly about keeping African-American, middle-class African-American families who have grown up here, who are now looking to leave the city. Talk to me about where you got the idea for that and kind of what you were trying to go for today.
Coming off some of these columns I've written about the absence of African-Americans in the city's revival, particularly downtown's revival, talking to some young African-American professionals, educated, successful, upperly mobile, about their aspirations, and they view the city and its desirability a lot different than the kids from the suburbs. These are folks who grew up here and have lived with crime. One woman I quoted in the column today said she grew up in Rosedale Park and her mother was shot at a gas station, robbed outside their home. This was in a good, solid, middle-class neighborhood. Her dad was a police officer. And so she grew up thinking, I want to get out of here. And now she's getting married, looking for a home, her and her husband looking for a home. They're looking in Novi, Northville, because as she said, at some point you want a less eventful life. You don't want to have to deal with these hassles. These are folks who grew up here, have been scarred a little bit by the city, where these suburban kids, it's still a playground. It's like, ooh, Detroit, look at all this cool stuff. And, they haven't had to look over their shoulders all their lives or deal with inferior schools and inadequate services. And I think that's part of the answer to why we're seeing so many more white faces downtown than we are African American.
It's really interesting. I mean, when you say that quote, I want to, you want to live a less eventful life. Does that resonate? Like when you heard that, Stephen?
No, absolutely. My own sister will say that. My sister grew up here like I did, and stayed a lot longer after undergrad. She came back here to go to med school and then did her internships and residency at the DMC. And as soon as she was done, she moved away, and she will say point blank, I will not live in Detroit anymore. I did my time there. I put up with all of the things that
Wait a minute. So she said, I did my time.
Yeah. No. I mean, that's how she thinks of it. That it's a burden, and it is in some ways. I mean, it is. There are not a lot of rational cases to be made for living in the city, particularly if you're trying to raise a family. Most of us who do it, I think, do it out of a sense of emotion and a sense of obligation. My sister doesn't have that, and she's firm about the idea that she deserves a less eventful life, a more stable community somewhere else.
So let me ask you, what is the Thanksgiving dinner conversation like with your family? Because you are so passionate about being in the city and making this your home.
I can get upset about it. I mean, I think part of the reason that the city is struggling as much as it is because people like my sister don't live here. I mean, this is, now she's an MD, also master's student in public health. I mean, this is a very upwardly mobile African-American woman who could contribute a lot to life in the city.
I mean, you understand her point.
Absolutely.
These folks I talked to aren't anti-Detroit. These people all said, we love our city, our heart's here, we're passionate about a city, we're happy to see it coming back, we want to participate any way we can. We just don't want our kids to go through what we went through. And I think ultimately, if the city's going to, the challenge for the city is the same as it is going to be to retain these young white kids who are coming in and moving into lofts. If they're going to retain them once they start having families,
having children,
they're going to have to provide safe neighborhoods and good schools.
Yeah, I mean, it's coming back down to education.
And it's for both black and white residents in the future. So I mean, nothing will hurt this revival more, or the sustainability of this revival, than not creating good neighborhood, safe schools.
And that's the thing, right? To sell upwardly mobile African Americans on the city, you have to fix all of the problems that have plagued the city for as long as they have. And someone like my sister is not going to think about Detroit differently until that changes.
So what? That's 15 years down the road. Safe neighborhoods, safe schools.
It may be never for someone like her. What my hope is that my kids who are growing up in the city now and actually are having a very different experience because of the things that are changing, maybe it's their generation that will help repopulate the city with African Americans, because they will think of it differently than their parents did.
What's the reaction that you're getting from Nolan? Because you're writing a series of columns that I think that are hard conversations for people to have about race and about the revitalization
all
of the city.
over the map, particularly from the young creative class, and particularly the African American who are part of this creative class, very resentful about talking
about what you're writing about.
Yeah, very extraordinarily so. You know, and they want to say, "There's no problem. We're here, and everybody's getting along, and there's no problem." Business community is starting to be a little intrigued and interested, and starting to look around and seeing what they should have been seeing, you know, all along. It's something we've been talking about for 2 or 3 years now. You know, that it is not a diverse downtown any longer. And so, I mean, I think there's interest in it. People do want to talk about it. I haven't been in a restaurant in the last month and sat down where somebody hasn't wanted to talk about this. Black, white, old, young. So it's a subject that's on people's minds, and I think that's a good thing.
All right, it definitely is. Okay, MiWeek.org. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.